Hi, I am Hercule Poirot, and welcome to my new mystery case.
The moon hung low over Charnwood Court, its pale light falling across the manicured lawns with an eeriness that belied the evening's earlier gaiety. Inside the grand estate, chandeliers glittered above a swirl of silk gowns, champagne glasses, and polite laughter. Lady Eugenia Charnwood's annual midsummer gala was, as always, the social event of the season. And tonight, beneath the veneer of cultured civility, an undercurrent of tension threaded itself quietly among the guests. It was nearing midnight when the first scream shattered the night. The sound cleaved through the air like a razor, silencing the murmurs of lingering partygoers gathered near the French doors. Moments earlier, a quartet had been playing a lilting waltz. Now, the violinist's bow froze mid-stroke. A footman, pale as fresh parchment, burst into the ballroom. "My lady, Lady Eugenia," she says, there's been an accident in the Moonbeam garden." No one waited for further explanation. Chairs scraped, jewelry clinked, whispers multiplied like startled birds. The Moonbeam garden, named for the alabaster marble statue at its heart, was an enclosed corner of the estate illuminated by discreet lamps and a view of the moon that Lady Charnwood claimed was artistically perfect, elegant, secluded. And now the stage for tragedy. Lady Eugenia herself, breath unsteady and complexion drained of its usual proud color, met the cluster of guests as they spilled out through the terrace. Her hand trembled as she gestured toward the garden. "It is Neville," she choked. Sir Neville Ashcombe, distinguished barrister, Lady Eugenia's longtime friend, and guest of honor for the evening, was sprawled at the base of the marble statue, his head at an unnatural angle, one arm outstretched as though reaching for salvation. His silk cravat was torn, his eyes stared upward, reflecting the cold moonlight with a glassy stillness. A few guests gasped. One fainted. Dr. Clemens, who had fortunately attended the gala, knelt beside the body. He touched Sir Neville's wrist, then his neck, then pressed his lips together grimly. "He is dead," he pronounced. Quite decisively so. "How?" Lady Eugenia whispered. "He stepped out scarcely minutes ago to make a telephone call. He would never have ventured into the garden. Neville despised the cold night air." Her voice shook. "This is not possible." The Moonbeam garden was immaculate. Neatly trimmed hedges, polished stone paths, lamps lit at soft intervals. For such a place, disorder was unmistakable, and a single sign of it stood out immediately. A crushed patch of lavender near the statue, a fallen silver cufflink glinting near Sir Neville's shoe, and a trail of faint, almost indiscernible scuff marks on the flagstones, leading toward the gazebo and stopping abruptly. A murmur ran through the gathering crowd. "Could he have slipped?" someone suggested, half-heartedly. "Ridiculous, look at the angle of his neck. Was he attacked?" But who would dare touch Sir Neville Ashcombe here, at Lady Charnwood's gala? Speculation churned in frantic circles. Dr. Clemens adjusted his spectacles. "There is bruising visible beneath the collar. This does not resemble a simple fall." Lady Eugenia swayed, gripping the stone balustrade for support. "He was to announce something important tonight, something legal," he said, "but of great consequence. He asked me only to be patient." The guests exchanged glances, sharp with curiosity and dread. From the terrace, a new voice pierced the chaos, calm, measured, unmistakable in its Belgian precision. "Madame, I fear patience is precisely what we must exercise now." All heads turned. Descending the terrace steps with deliberate grace was Monsieur Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed, his silver moustaches shining faintly in the moonlight like the twin blades of a ceremonial dagger. Lady Eugenia exhaled a breath of desperate relief. "Monsieur Poirot, thank heavens. I did not know you had arrived." Poirot inclined his head. "I was delayed, alas, but it appears I am in time for something most grave." His eyes traveled to the lifeless form of Sir Neville, the crushed lavender, the glinting cufflink. A tragedy under the moon, yes, but not an accident. No, this has the scent of design. The guests drew in a collective breath. Poirot continued. his voice low but commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, forgive me, but I must ask that none of you leave the premises this evening. It is imperative that order be preserved in this moment of confusion." He knelt briefly beside the body, his gaze scanning every detail, not with horror, but with a quiet, exacting fascination. "Sir Neville Ashcombe," he murmured. A man of law silenced before he could speak. Curious, very curious indeed. He rose, turning to Lady Eugenia. "Madame, you shall have your answers. The truth, it hides itself beneath shadows and moonbeams. But Hercule Poirot, he will find it." The wind stirred the hedges, carrying the scent of crushed lavender across the courtyard. Somewhere in the garden, a lamp flickered before steadying again, and within that fragile stillness, the invisible web of suspicion began to tighten. Lady Eugenia's breath still quivered as Poirot guided her gently away from the cluster of murmuring guests, his voice lowered but firm, urging calm where panic threatened to blossom. The night air carried a nervous chill, though no breeze stirred the hedges. Lamps glowed softly along the stone path, casting elongated shadows across the Moonbeam garden, each shape seeming to hint at secrets not yet spoken. "Madame," Poirot said, his sharp eyes studying her expression as one might examine the delicate cracks of a porcelain vase. "You must steady yourself. This moment, it demands clarity. You said Sir Neville stepped outside for a telephone call. Did he seem troubled?" Lady Eugenia pressed a silk handkerchief to her lips. He appeared thoughtful, nothing more. Neville was a man of composure. If anything troubled him, he masked it with that calm of his. Her voice wavered. "But he did say his announcement tonight might upset certain parties. He warned me there could be reactions." Poirot's brows arched with controlled interest. Reactions? Intriguing. And who, precisely, formed this circle of possible concern? Before she could answer, a brisk figure approached Inspector Jonathan Hale, summoned by a footman moments after the body was discovered. Hale was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s, efficient to a fault and usually indifferent to Poirot's methods, though not foolish enough to dismiss them entirely. He tipped his hat at Lady Eugenia before addressing Poirot. "I've taken statements from the closest guests still present near the terrace," he said. "Most claim they saw nothing unusual, but everyone is understandably shaken. A death on the property of this prominence will demand delicate handling." Poirot nodded. "Delicacy, yes, but also precision. You and I must ensure that no movement of the suspects passes unnoticed. A murderer, he is often most talkative immediately after the deed, if only through his manner." Hale scanned the garden with a practical eye. "There are no obvious signs of struggle other than the crushed lavender. No weapon, no piece of clothing left behind. If someone attacked him, they were swift and purposeful," Poirot added. "Observe, Inspector, the cufflink. A small thing, yet perhaps very loud in its meaning." Hale crouched to examine it. Silver, engraved with initials. N.A. Could it have fallen during a struggle? "Or been placed," Poirot murmured, "to suggest a struggle where none existed." His gaze sharpened. "But let us not run before we walk. First, we must gather the individuals who form the tableau of this evening's drama." As if summoned by the remark itself, 3 figures approached from the terrace, each wearing expressions of anxiety mingled with curiosity. Lady Eugenia introduced them with trembling decorum. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Hale, these are some of our closest guests tonight. You may need to speak with them." The first was Mr. Adrian Whitcomb, a tall, elegant man in his early 50s. Known for his investments across Europe, his refined manner suggested confidence. Yet there was something guarded beneath his polite smile. "A dreadful occurrence," he said softly. "Sir Neville was a dear colleague. To think that such violence could touch this house, it is unthinkable." Beside him stood Miss Verena Locke, a celebrated stage actress whose reputation for passionate performances was matched only by her reputation for turbulent personal affairs. Her auburn hair framed a face striking enough to draw attention even in grief. She dabbed her eyes theatrically. "Neville was advising me on an important matter," she declared. I cannot fathom why anyone would wish him harm. The last of the trio was Julian Harcourt, a young solicitor who had recently joined Sir Neville's legal practice. His posture was rigid, his hands clasped tightly behind his back as though restraining nerves. "Sir Neville was my mentor," he said. I cannot believe this has happened." His eyes flicked briefly toward the statue before he forced them away. Poirot regarded each of them with measured interest. "Messieurs, mademoiselle, you are all present in the vicinity this evening. You will understand that I must ask certain questions, though I assure you we seek only clarity." Verena clasped her hands dramatically. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot, anything you need, though I doubt any of us know anything truly useful." "Perhaps," Poirot replied mildly. "But the smallest remark, the faintest memory these can be, the golden threads that reveal the pattern." Adrian Whitcomb exhaled sharply. "Well, I did see Neville step outside before the commotion. He said he needed a moment of quiet before addressing the guests. I assumed he wished to gather his thoughts." "Did he appear hurried?" Poirot asked. "No, but he did seem unusually distracted." Poirot turned his attention to Julian Harcourt. "And you, monsieur, you worked closely with Sir Neville. Did he confide in you about tonight's announcement?" Julian hesitated. "He mentioned something regarding a significant legal matter, something involving an inheritance dispute, but he did not elaborate. He said the fewer who knew beforehand, the better." Verena's eyes widened with theatrical alarm. "An inheritance? That always spells trouble." Poirot observed her reaction, filing it away without comment. Instead, he gestured to the garden. "Tell me, were any of you near this area tonight?" Adrian shook his head at once. "No, I remained indoors." Julian mirrored the gesture. "I was speaking with guests in the library." Verena hesitated. "I stepped out briefly for air but went no farther than the terrace. I never entered the garden." Poirot nodded slowly, as though weighing each detail on an invisible scale. "Thank you. For now, I ask that you remain available. There will be further questions." The three departed with varying degrees of reluctance, leaving Poirot alone with Inspector Hale once more. The moonlight shimmered across the statue, illuminating the lifeless form of Sir Neville in stark contrast to the cultivated beauty surrounding him. Poirot folded his arms. "There is disorder here in the garden, in the testimonies, in the unspoken emotions. And where disorder exists, motive is never far away." Hale narrowed his eyes. "You think one of them is lying already?" Poirot's moustaches twitched thoughtfully. "Mon ami, someone always lies. The question is, for which reason? Self-preservation, loyalty, or guilt? Tonight, we begin to discover which." The lamps flickered again, as though responding to his words. And in that quiet pulse of light, the investigation settled into motion with a weight that promised deeper revelations ahead. Inspector Hale took a slow step toward the crushed lavender, nudging the petals gently with the tip of his shoe. The scent rose faintly, sharp and almost medicinal in the cold night air. "Whoever approached him," he murmured, "either did so quickly or struggled with him here. But footprints are light, too light. The ground is firm." Poirot crouched beside the scuff marks again, fingertips hovering a hair's breadth above the stone. "These marks, Inspector, they are intriguing. Not deep enough for a chase, not chaotic enough for a fight. More like—" He paused, eyelids lowering in concentration. "More like someone shifting weight uncertainly. The hesitation of a visitor who is unsure whether to advance or retreat." Hale frowned. "Meaning the attacker may have doubted himself?" "Or herself," Poirot corrected gently. "Guilt, fear, affection, any of these can create hesitation. But none absolve a murderer." From the terrace came the soft sound of a door closing, followed by hurried footsteps on the gravel path. A young maid approached, clutching her apron. Her eyes darted from Poirot to the inspector, then nervously toward Sir Neville's still form. "Begging your pardon, sirs," she whispered, "but Lady Eugenia requests that you come inside. A few guests are becoming agitated, and she fears someone might leave without permission." Hale shot Poirot a meaningful glance. "We need to keep everyone contained." Poirot nodded. "Yes, let us proceed." The theater of human anxiety is most informative. Inside, the ballroom had dimmed, though the chandeliers still glowed with a subdued brilliance. Guests clustered in uneasy knots, their conversations hushed but fervent. The gaiety of the gala had evaporated. In its place lingered an atmosphere of suspicion so dense it might have been sliced with a knife. Lady Eugenia stood near the fireplace, one hand gripping the mantel as if anchoring herself. Her composure remained fragile. "Monsieur Poirot, I fear this night spirals beyond my control. Some guests insist they must leave at once." Poirot lifted a reassuring palm. "Madam, I sympathize. But for the sake of truth, it is imperative that all remain until this matter has been understood. You may rely upon me." "Yes." Her eyes softened with gratitude. "Of course. Whatever you require." Adrian Whitcomb approached quietly, his tall figure casting a narrow shadow across the carpet. "Lady Eugenia, you mustn't distress yourself further. But Monsieur Poirot, surely it is unreasonable to detain all of us. Some guests have early engagements tomorrow." Poirot studied him with mild curiosity. "Monsieur, a man has been killed mere steps from where you enjoyed your evening. Even the smallest departure could remove a thread essential to the tapestry. Surely you understand?" Whitcomb hesitated, then bowed his head slightly and retreated. Miss Verena Locke, standing near a cluster of admirers, watched him go before drifting toward Poirot with feline grace. "He dislikes confinement," she murmured. "Adrian has always been impatient when order is imposed upon him. Still, Neville's death has shocked us all." Poirot tilted his head. "You speak with sympathy, mademoiselle. But earlier you stated that Sir Neville was advising you. Was your relationship solely professional?" Her lips curved in a faint, defensive smile. "Do you ask as a detective or as a man seeking gossip?" "As a detective," Poirot replied simply. She sighed, folding her arms. "Very well. Neville and I were friends, nothing improper. He offered guidance on a contract dispute with my theater company. I never imagined our final conversation would be tonight." Poirot noted her trembling fingers. "And his announcement this evening, did he hint at its nature to you?" "No. He merely said it would have far-reaching consequences." That sounded ominous, but Neville liked dramatic phrasing. Her expression shadowed. "I suppose we all do, on stage or off." Poirot observed her closely. Her grief felt real, yet he had learned that genuine sorrow and dangerous guilt were not mutually exclusive. "Merci, mademoiselle. You may rejoin the others." As she drifted away, Julian Harcourt entered the ballroom from the direction of the library, adjusting his cuffs, face pale beneath the warm lighting. Poirot intercepted him gently. "Julian, if you please, another question. Earlier you mentioned the inheritance dispute. Might Sir Neville's announcement tonight have unsettled someone here?" Julian swallowed. "Possibly. He spoke of a will, an old one resurfacing. But he was secretive. Unusually so. Even I had little insight." He hesitated, dropping his voice. "I should confess something. I saw Adrian Whitcomb arguing with Neville 2 days ago at the office. It was heated more than professional disagreement." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "An argument? And the subject?" "I only caught fragments. Something about responsibility and promises made under pressure." Adrian left in a fury. This revelation added a subtle but significant weight to the evening's uncertainties. Poirot thanked the young man, who departed looking visibly relieved. Hale joined Poirot then, murmuring, "Whitcomb argued with the victim. That's a lead, a thread." Poirot corrected. "But threads must intertwine before they reveal the pattern." The room grew quieter as Poirot stepped to its center, his gaze sweeping across the anxious faces. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some averting their eyes, others meeting his stare with unspoken defiance. He spoke softly, yet with undeniable authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, I ask for your patience. Each of you is part of this evening's story. The truth, when revealed, will concern all present." A tense silence rippled through the ballroom. Then a loud crash rang out from the eastern hallway. Guests jolted. Hale's hand went instinctively toward his coat. Poirot turned, every sense alert. The maid burst back into the ballroom, breathless. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector, there's been another incident. In the study." Poirot's expression hardened. the quiet resolve sharpening in his eyes like polished steel. "Come, Inspector." The night unfolds further, and together they strode toward the study, where new shadows awaited. Poirot and Inspector Hale strode swiftly down the eastern hallway, the maid hurrying behind them with the frantic steps of someone desperate to be useful yet terrified of what she might find. The corridor was dimmer than the ballroom, lined with oil portraits whose painted eyes seemed to follow their movement with silent accusation. A faint smell of something acrid burned paper perhaps drifted toward them even before they reached the study door. The door stood ajar. Hale motioned for silence, then nudged it open with slow caution. The study was a handsome room, richly paneled in walnut, with shelves of leather-bound volumes rising almost to the ceiling. A large window overlooked the Moonbeam garden, though the curtains had been drawn halfway, as if someone had attempted to obscure the view in haste. A single lamp burned on the desk, illuminating a flurry of scattered papers and a broken glass in the hearth. Poirot entered first, his gaze sweeping across every detail with the meticulousness of a jeweler examining a rare gem. "Ah," he murmured, "we arrive not a moment too late." Near the wastebasket lay a half-burned document, its edges curled and blackened but not fully consumed. Hale crouched, retrieving it carefully with his pocket-knife to avoid smudging anything with his hands. "Someone tried to destroy this," he said, "and recently. The ash is still warm." "Indeed," Poirot replied, leaning closer. "But in their haste, they did not succeed." Hale scanned what remained of the text. Legal language. Looks like the beginning of a will, or perhaps an amendment to one. Could this be tied to the inheritance Julian mentioned? Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Very likely. And if Sir Neville intended to reveal something connected to this document tonight, it may explain why another crime has already followed his death. Someone fears what the truth contains. A movement near the window startled the maid, who gasped and stepped backward. Hale straightened sharply, hand braced on his holster, but Poirot lifted a calming hand. A curtain had fluttered slightly, nothing more. Still, the sensation of being watched lingered like a cold whisper against the nape of the neck. Poirot approached the desk next, noting the ink bottle still uncapped, the blotter pushed askew, and a fountain pen lying at an unnatural angle, its nib pointing toward the hearth. "Someone rifled through these papers with purpose," he said. "See how the drawer is left open only halfway. No neat mind would leave it so." The maid swallowed hard. Would the murderer come back here, monsieur?" Poirot regarded her gently. "If the murderer sought something, mademoiselle, then yes. A criminal may be bold when desperate." Hale exhaled sharply. "We need to question everyone again. Someone slipped away from the ballroom long enough to attempt this, and failed," Poirot added. "Which will make them anxious. Anxiety breeds mistakes." A soft creak behind them caused Hale to whirl around. Julian Harcourt stood in the doorway, breath quick and complexion ashen. "Inspector," he said, voice barely steady. "I saw people running. Is something else wrong?" Poirot's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "Monsieur Julien, why have you come here?" I followed the commotion. I didn't want to stay in the ballroom after that awful crash." Hale stepped toward him. "Did you leave the room earlier? Before or after? We questioned you." Julian hesitated. And in that heartbeat of uncertainty, both men noted the flicker of fear that crossed his features. I stepped out briefly to compose myself. "Sir Neville's death. It has shaken me. I had no idea anything happened in the study." Poirot observed him closely. "Yet it is curious, is it not, that you arrived so quickly?" Almost immediately after the alarm was raised, Julian bristled. "Are you suggesting I had something to do with this?" I suggest nothing. I merely observe." Poirot turned away, allowing the statement to linger. "Tell me, monsieur, did you know of any documents Sir Neville kept here regarding the inheritance matter?" Julian's shoulders sagged. "He stored confidential papers in his study, yes, but he rarely allowed anyone access to them, not even me. Still," he paused, torment churning in his eyes. "I believe the document he intended to reveal tonight was a codicil, something that would overturn an existing claim. That could upset many people," Hale remarked. Too many, Julian whispered. Poirot stepped closer, his voice quiet. And were any of those people present this evening? Julian swallowed again. Adrian Whitcomb. Yes, he and Sir Neville were involved in a legal trusteeship years ago. But I never imagined anything violent. Before Poirot could question him further, another figure appeared, Verena Locke, her face pale but her bearing theatrical as ever. Monsieur Poirot. Inspector, what is happening? Guests are panicking. Lady Eugenia fears this ordeal will drive her to collapse. Hale muttered under his breath. This night keeps getting better. Poirot turned toward Verena. Mademoiselle, did you leave the ballroom at any point since we last spoke? She blinked, startled by the abruptness of the question. Only for a moment to fetch my wrap from the cloakroom. The room was chilly. Alone? Yes, of course. Why would I not be? Poirot held her gaze a moment longer than was comfortable. Then he nodded, though his expression remained unreadable. Merci. Adrian Whitcomb entered next, having followed Verena. Inspector Hale, he demanded with thinly veiled frustration. Is there any progress? This confinement is becoming intolerable. Poirot gestured toward the burned document. Someone attempted to destroy evidence in this room. Monsieur. Adrian stiffened. Evidence? Yes, Poirot said softly. Evidence connected to Sir Neville's death. A hush settled over the study. Tense as drawn wire. Adrian's jaw tightened. I assure you, Poirot, I have nothing to do with any of this. Perhaps not, Poirot replied. But many assurances are given on nights like this. His gaze drifted briefly toward the window, where the moon cast a pale sliver of light across the carpet, and yet truth reveals itself whether invited or not. Hale broke the silence. We should secure this room. No one goes in or out without supervision. Poirot agreed. Yes. For now, let us return to the ballroom. The murderer grows nervous. As they left the study, Poirot's mind stirred with new calculations, each observation knitting itself into a pattern not yet complete, but forming slowly, inevitably toward revelation. Something told him the next piece of the puzzle would emerge before dawn. As Poirot and Inspector Hale re-entered the ballroom, the tension that hovered over the guests felt sharper, almost crystalline, as though every whispered conversation carried the risk of fracturing into panic. Lady Eugenia stood near the center, her hands clasped before her in a desperate attempt at dignity. At her approach, Poirot gave a small, reassuring nod. Though inwardly, he sensed the delicate threads of the evening drawing tighter. Every eye seemed to follow him, as though each guest feared he could read guilt directly from their features. Hale, meanwhile, stepped aside to speak with two constables who had just arrived, issuing brisk instructions regarding securing the exits. Headaches of logistics lay ahead, but Poirot's mind moved past physical barriers towards subtler lines of inquiry. For the murderer, he knew, danger came not from doors or windows, but from conversation, from memory, and from the quiet betrayals of their own anxiety. He lifted a hand, signaling gently for attention. Guests fell gradually silent, forming a loose semicircle around him. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began with a calm authority. I ask only cooperation. Tonight has seen tragedy, and now an attempt to destroy important papers. We must all remain calm and truthful. The murmurs resumed softly. Subdued by the gravity of his tone, Adrian Whitcomb lingered at the far edge of the group, arms crossed, gaze fixed somewhere beyond the chandelier, as though the room itself offended him. Verena Locke drifted closer, watching Poirot intently through widened eyes. Julian Harcourt hovered near Lady Eugenia, offering her awkward comfort while seeming simultaneously unsure whether he should call attention to himself. Poirot read each subtle movement like lines in a play where actors did not realize the script was already unfolding. A footman approached Poirot quietly. Monsieur, there is someone who wishes to speak with you. She insists it is urgent. Poirot inclined his head, following the footman to a small alcove just outside the ballroom. There, a maid stood wringing her hands, her expression troubled. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered, I did not want to speak before others, but I must tell you something. Earlier, before the scream, I saw someone near the Moonbeam garden. Poirot's eyes softened with encouragement. Go on, mademoiselle. The maid glanced over her shoulder before continuing. It was Mr. Whitcomb. He was pacing near the statue before Sir Neville was found. I thought it strange, but I said nothing. He looked distressed. Poirot thanked her with quiet gravity. Your courage may help bring justice, he said. The maid hurried away, visibly relieved. Poirot remained still for a moment, absorbing the new detail. Distressed pacing, a heated argument earlier, and now a presence near the garden. Each fact alone was insufficient, but together they whispered possibilities. Still, he knew better than to leap to conclusions. That path was for lesser detectives. Returning to the ballroom, Poirot observed Whitcomb now speaking to Verena Locke with a veneer of calm. Yet there was tension in the line of his jaw, in the way his fingers tapped restlessly against his sleeve. Verena, by contrast, seemed intent on soothing him, or perhaps on assessing his thoughts. Poirot approached them. Monsieur Whitcomb, he said lightly, might we speak privately? Adrian stiffened but nodded, following Poirot to a quieter corner of the room. Hale joined them discreetly. Monsieur, Poirot began, we have learned that you were near the Moonbeam garden before Sir Neville's body was found. Whitcomb's expression froze, then darkened. Who told you that? Someone, observant, Poirot replied. Is it true? Adrian hesitated. His voice, when it emerged, was strained. Yes. I stepped out to gather my thoughts. Neville and I had disagreements, but I would never harm him. Hale crossed his arms. Disagreements serious enough to argue in public earlier this week. Adrian's eyes flashed, but not with fury, rather with something bordering on anguish. Neville refused to support a legal decision that would protect someone close to me. He believed the law must follow principle, not emotion. I believed otherwise. Poirot noted the sincerity shaping his tone, but also the edge of desperation beneath it. Before he could probe further, a sharp cry rose from near the stairs leading to the upper landing. Guests turned as a housemaid came stumbling down, pale and shaking. Monsieur Poirot, Inspector, there is someone upstairs, you must come. There is blood on the landing. Signaling constables to follow, Poirot cast Whitcomb a final measured look before heading toward the staircase. The carpeted steps muffled their ascent, but tension echoed loudly in every heartbeat. Near the landing, a small smear of crimson marred the polished banister, stark and chilling in its clarity. Hale knelt to examine it. Fresh, he muttered. Poirot's gaze traveled down the dim corridor leading to guest rooms. A door halfway down stood slightly ajar, light spilling faintly into the hallway. There, Poirot murmured. They approached with slow caution. Hale pushed the door wider, revealing the room within. No body, no intruder, but clear signs of a hurried search. Drawers open, cushions overturned, a wardrobe partially emptied. Poirot surveyed the disruption. Someone searches for something desperately, he said. The second crime tonight, and yet no clarity. But we grow closer. Hale rubbed his jaw. If the killer is panicking, we may catch them soon. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet certainty. Oui, mon ami. They weave their own trap. As they stepped back into the corridor, the distant chime of the clock sounded midnight. Poirot paused, listening. Something within the house felt poised on a knife's edge. A revelation hovered near, faint as a whisper, yet inevitable. And somewhere nearby, hidden among the frightened guests, the murderer was beginning to unravel. Poirot lingered on the landing a moment longer, absorbing the faint traces of disturbance, the smear of blood, the half-open door, the air carrying the metallic tang of fear. The constables spread down the corridor, checking each room swiftly but carefully. Only echoes answered them. No intruder, no hiding figure, no fresh body. Yet Poirot's instincts stirred with a quiet certainty that something critical had occurred here, and not merely a frantic search. He touched the banister where the blood streak thinned into nothingness, then brought his fingers together thoughtfully. This, he murmured, is no simple accident of panic. It is deliberate, but for whose benefit? Hale straightened from examining a drawer left askew. So the murderer injures himself running around the house? That seems reckless. Poirot shook his head. Not necessarily himself. Consider, the more confusion created tonight, the harder it is to follow the logical pattern. A clever criminal might hope to drown clarity beneath chaos. Yet chaos, true chaos, is rarely intentional. They returned downstairs, guided by the rising hum of nervous conversations. The guests watched their descent with wide, expectant eyes, as though every movement of Poirot's might signal the unmasking of guilt. Lady Eugenia hurried forward, pale and trembling. "Monsieur Poirot, tell me, was someone hurt?" Poirot gave a slight but reassuring bow. "No body was found, madame. A disturbance, only. But one that tells us the culprit becomes increasingly uneasy." Lady Eugenia pressed a hand to her throat. "Uneasy? Oh dear. This horrid night will be the end of me." Julian Harcourt helped steady her, murmuring soft reassurances, though his own face bore the strain of the evening's developments. Poirot watched him in silence. The young man appeared genuinely distressed, yet Poirot detected a certain tension within him, a readiness to flinch, as though fearing every new revelation might point unexpectedly toward himself. But guilt did not always signal murder. It could just as easily signal fear of secrets tangential yet incriminating. Another thread to follow later. Adrian Whitcomb, on the other hand, stood rigid near the fireplace, staring into the flames as though hoping they might offer him clarity. His earlier composure eroded slightly, leaving cracks Poirot could now observe with greater precision. Verena Locke hovered nearby, not intimately close, yet positioned with deliberate intention. She watched Adrian as much as she watched Poirot, her expressive eyes betraying worry, curiosity, and perhaps a measure of calculation. Poirot approached them. "Mes amis," he said softly. "Another search has taken place, one upstairs. Someone seeks papers or objects connected with Sir Neville's plans tonight." Adrian turned sharply, his impatience flaring. "Then find them. Surely you have enough evidence by now to narrow the suspect list." Poirot regarded him calmly. "Evidence, yes, but motive reveals itself more slowly. I observe you are troubled, monsieur. Perhaps you fear what might be discovered." Adrian flushed. "I fear only the scandal. Lady Eugenia's reputation and Neville's legacy could be tarnished by sensational speculation." Verena looked between them nervously. "This is not the time for bickering. Someone is trying to mislead us all. I can feel it." Poirot studied her a moment longer. Her dramatic instincts lent certain truth to her words, but drama also had a way of obscuring intention. He shifted focus. "Mademoiselle Locke, earlier you fetched your wrap. Did you notice anyone on the stairs or near the upper landing on your return?" She seemed surprised by the question. "No. The hallway was empty. Though," she hesitated, biting her lip, "there was a slight creaking sound from above when I passed the staircase. I assumed it was the house settling." Poirot did not dismiss the detail. "Merci. Even the smallest sound may hint at someone's presence." Hale joined them then, his expression strained. "The constables have secured the upper floor. No one up there now. If someone was searching the rooms, they fled quickly." Poirot nodded, though his gaze drifted toward the far end of the ballroom, where a solitary figure observed them with unusual intensity. It was the elderly Sir Geoffrey Elmsley, a retired judge invited to the gala. Until now, he had remained largely silent, seated with dignified restraint. Poirot approached. "Sir Geoffrey, you have been quiet tonight. May I ask whether anything struck you as unusual before the tragedy?" The old judge leaned upon his cane, eyes still sharp despite his years. "Unusual?" he mused. "A great many things, but perhaps one thing chiefly. I saw Sir Neville shortly before he stepped outside. He appeared conflicted, as though he had reached a decision that burdened him." Poirot felt a ripple of interest. "Did he speak to you?" "Only briefly. He told me, 'Tonight I correct a wrong long overdue.' He said it with a gravity that unsettled me." Poirot absorbed the words. "A wrong long overdue," he repeated quietly. Such phrasing hints at powerful emotions and powerful consequences. Hale exhaled. "So, we're dealing with a legal wrong, connected to that codicil." Sir Geoffrey nodded. No doubt. Just then, a commotion arose, near the balcony doors. A constable hurried in, followed by the same young maid from earlier, her face drained of color. "Monsieur Poirot," she cried. "Inspector, someone has been outside again near the Moonbeam garden." Guests gasped. Poirot moved swiftly, Hale beside him. They stepped onto the terrace. The night air had grown colder, the wind picking up with an eerie rustle through the hedges. Lamps flickered as though struggling against an unseen force. The constable pointed toward the garden path. "Footprints, sir. Fresh ones. Leading toward the gazebo." Poirot leaned in. The prints were narrow, the steps light, yet purposeful. Unlike the earlier scuff marks, these carried urgency. Hale took a step forward, but Poirot held out an arm. "Careful, mon ami. Our visitor may still be near." They followed the trail slowly. The moon illuminated the stone gazebo with ghostly brilliance. As they reached it, Poirot's eyes fell upon something resting near the base of a column of folded handkerchief. He lifted it delicately. The initials embroidered in the corner were unmistakable. V.L. Poirot's eyes narrowed, not with certainty but with contemplation. "The net tightens," he whispered. "But this feels too easily found." Hale scowled. "Are you suggesting it's planted?" "Perhaps. A murderer who panics makes mistakes. A murderer who thinks himself clever makes different mistakes. Tonight, we shall see which we pursue." And beneath the moonlight, the mystery deepened. Poirot turned the embroidered handkerchief slowly between his fingers, studying the delicate stitching as though it were a cipher. Hale watched his face carefully. "You think it was planted," he said. "But by whom? Someone trying to implicate Verena Locke?" Poirot gave a slight shrug, eyes fixed on the fabric. "Perhaps. Or perhaps she truly dropped it here. The truth, it dances between possibilities. We must follow each step without assumption." The lamps flickered again, brushing the gazebo in trembling shadows. Poirot inhaled the cold air deeply. "Let us return inside. I wish to observe how Mademoiselle reacts when confronted with this little item." Hale nodded, motioning the constable to remain outside and watch the garden. Together they walked back toward the bright glow of the ballroom, where soft murmurs built into a rising wave the moment Poirot stepped through the threshold. Verena stood near the fireplace, hands clasped tightly, as though trying to hold herself together. Julian spoke with Lady Eugenia in hurried whispers, while Adrian paced in short, rigid lines, like a man trapped in an invisible cage. Sir Geoffrey remained seated, observing all with judicial calm. Poirot made no immediate move toward Verena. Instead, he drifted toward the center of the room and allowed the natural gravity of his presence to pull attention toward him. When silence settled, he spoke. "Certain objects, they speak. Tonight, one such object has made itself known." Slowly, he held up the handkerchief. A ripple trembled across the room. Verena's breath caught audibly. Her hand flew to her throat. That is mine," she said. "Where did you find it?" Poirot approached her gently, though his eyes grew keen. "In the Moonbeam garden, near the gazebo. Fresh footprints led us there." Her expression shifted in a series of flickers. Shock, confusion, fear. I don't understand. I did not go that far outside. I swear it." Adrian stepped toward her defensively. "Verena was with me most of the evening, Poirot. You're reading too much into a misplaced item." Poirot regarded him calmly. "Yet earlier, Mademoiselle admitted she stepped outside for air. Might she have walked farther than she recalls?" Verena shook her head vehemently. "No, I was nowhere near the gazebo." Hale's tone hardened. "Then someone stole it to frame you." Verena's eyes widened. "Is that what happened? Who would do such a thing? Who would hate me enough? Or want to blame me for Neville's murder?" Poirot made a small gesture of restraint. "Let us not leap to accusations. Instead, let us consider the pattern." He turned slightly, eyes sweeping the guests. "Someone searches for documents upstairs. Someone burns papers in the study. Someone leaves footprints in the garden. The murderer is restless, pressed by time, and afraid. Adrian exhaled sharply. Afraid of what? Poirot met his gaze. Afraid that Sir Neville's secret, his announcement, will be revealed despite his death. Julian swallowed heavily, his hands tightening at his sides. Poirot, if the codicil was found, or if someone knows its contents, it could destroy reputations, careers, fortunes. Lady Eugenia, trembling, whispered, Neville never wished harm upon anyone. Whatever truth he meant to share tonight, it must have been necessary. Poirot nodded slowly. Just so. Then, without warning, he turned to Julian. Monsieur, earlier you said, Neville hinted, the codicil involved an old wrong. Tell me, was that wrong connected to money or to something deeper? Julian hesitated too long. Poirot noticed. Hale noticed. Adrian noticed. The room tightened around him. Finally, Julian whispered, both. Poirot leaned in slightly. Explain. Julian's voice trembled. Years ago, Neville handled the estate of a wealthy client. There was confusion, some say deliberate, some accidental, regarding a large inheritance meant for a young relative. The money went instead to an older guardian. Neville regretted the outcome but could not overturn it then. Tonight he intended to reveal new evidence that proved the younger heir had been wronged. A murmur rose, thick with surprise and unease. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And this younger heir, are they present tonight? Julian nodded slowly. Yes. Poirot's gaze swept the room. Who? Julian's voice faltered. Verena. The actress recoiled as though struck. Me? That's absurd. Neville never told me, never hinted. How could I be an heir to anything? Adrian moved instinctively toward her, but Poirot raised a hand. Remain where you are, monsieur. Verena shook her head wildly. No. This is nonsense. Poirot watched her carefully. You truly did not know? Of course not, Julian added quickly. Neville discovered proof only days ago. He said he would clear the matter tonight. He hesitated, but he worried the old guardian would fight back. Poirot's brow lifted. Guardian? Who? Julian's eyes turned toward Adrian Whitcomb with unmistakable meaning. A stunned silence fell like a curtain. Adrian straightened, offense and dread colliding in his expression. This is outrageous. I was never a guardian. Julian's voice wavered. Not formally. But your investments were tied to the family trust. You benefited from the misdirection of funds. Adrian's face reddened. I did nothing illegal. Poirot stepped closer, his voice low but razor-sharp. Perhaps not illegal, monsieur, but profitable. And now Sir Neville's announcement threatened to expose everything. Verena looked between them, trembling. Adrian, tell me it's untrue. Adrian's jaw clenched. Verena, listen. Whatever Julian believes, Neville misunderstood. Poirot interjected softly. A man cornered by truth grows desperate, n'est-ce pas? Adrian glared at him. If you think I killed Neville, you are gravely mistaken. Poirot's expression remained unreadable. Perhaps, or perhaps, your desperation took another shape tonight. Hale stepped forward. Adrian Whitcomb, I believe you should accompany us for questioning. But before he could move, a shriek burst from the terrace. A constable shouted, Inspector! Someone's running through the garden. Poirot's eyes sharpened with sudden fire. The murderer, he whispered, makes their move. The moment the constable's cry echoed through the ballroom, a surge of alarm rippled across the guests. Hale reacted first, springing toward the terrace with two officers in quick pursuit. Poirot followed at a measured pace, his eyes narrowed, his mind already assembling the shape of this new development. In the wake of so many disruptions, one truth grew increasingly clear. The murderer, whoever they were, was losing composure. Cold night air enveloped them as they stepped into the Moonbeam garden. The constable pointed frantically toward the hedgerow. There, someone just darted past those shrubs. I saw a figure moving toward the side path. Hale barked orders. Fan out! Cut off every exit! The constables dashed across the lawn, torches slicing through the darkness. Poirot, however, did not run. Instead, he stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly. listening. Footfalls echoed faintly, rapid, uneven, betraying desperation. A branch snapped somewhere to the right. The wind brushed through the lavender, carrying the scent across the garden in trembling waves. Hale hurried back toward Poirot. "Did you see anything?" Poirot gestured toward the shadows near the stone wall. "There!" The sound of someone struggling against the brambles. Hale strode forward, torch raised. "Show yourself!" But when light flooded the corner, no figure emerged. Only a bent section of hedging indicated someone had forced their way through. Poirot examined the broken twigs. "A hasty escape," he murmured. "The murderer is bold enough to risk flight, but foolish enough to leave signs." Hale cursed under his breath. "They can't have gone far. The gates are locked, and constables cover the perimeter." Poirot touched the leaves delicately. Yet, if their intention was escape, they would not choose the garden. No, this was not flight. It was misdirection. Hale turned sharply. Misdirection? Then, what were they doing here? Retrieving or planting something, perhaps, Poirot said, or creating confusion to delay us. But their greatest mistake, mon ami, was to assume panic would cloud the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot. They moved deeper into the garden, passing the marble statue where Sir Neville's body had first been found. The moonlight gave the stone figure a mournful brilliance. Poirot paused, gazing at the base of the statue. Something glimmered faintly, a fragment of metal half caught between two stones. Hale stooped. "Another cufflink?" Poirot knelt beside him. "None. Look more closely." It was a metal clasp, small, ornate, shaped like a stylized fleur-de-lis. Not the sort worn on a sleeve, but the type used to fasten the strap of a handbag or purse. Hale frowned. "So the intruder dropped this?" "Possibly," Poirot said. "But whose handbag bears such a clasp?" Before Hale could answer, hurried footsteps approached from behind. Verena Locke appeared, breathless, clutching her wrap tightly around her shoulders. "Inspector!" I heard shouting. "What has happened? Have you caught them?" Hale turned on her. "You should be inside!" "I couldn't remain there," she said, trembling. Everyone was looking at me as though I'd murdered Neville myself. Poirot studied her with piercing gentleness. "Mademoiselle, does your handbag use a clasp such as this?" He held up the small metal piece. Verena blinked, startled. "No. My bag has no clasp. It closes with a simple latch." "Why? What is that?" Poirot watched her closely. "A clue, perhaps, or another attempt to frame you." Her eyes widened. "Someone is trying to destroy me, Monsieur Poirot. First the handkerchief. Now this someone wants me blamed. Or someone wants us to believe so," Poirot murmured. Before more could be said, a constable called from near the side gate. "Inspector Hale, we found tracks leading toward the greenhouse." Hale motioned for Poirot to follow as they hurried across the gravel path. The greenhouse loomed ahead, its glass panes reflecting distorted slivers of moonlight. The door was ajar. Hale pushed it open cautiously. Warm, humid air rolled out, rich with the scent of soil and exotic flowers. The lanterns inside flickered weakly. Rows of potted plants cast intricate patterns across the floor. Poirot stepped inside, every sense alert. A pot had been knocked over near the back, its soil scattered across the tiles. "Someone was here recently," Hale muttered. "But why come to the greenhouse?" Poirot moved forward, scanning the room. "Because it is secluded. Because something could be hidden easily. Or because it offers an exit unknown to most." He stopped abruptly before a small side table. A torn scrap of paper lay beside a pruning shear. Hale lifted it carefully. "Part of a letter?" Poirot read the faded ink. "Cannot allow this to proceed. You must reconsider before the announcement." The rest was missing. Hale looked at him grimly. "This is a threat." Poirot nodded. "We," and likely addressed to Sir Neville. "We, too, addressed to Sir Neville." They stepped deeper until Poirot halted again. His voice lowered. There. Behind a large fern lay a stack of documents tied with twine. Hale untied the cords and exhaled sharply. "Legal files. These must be Neville's." Rife. Poirot nodded slowly. Someone removed these earlier. They intended either to destroy them or to keep them hidden until they could escape safely. Hale shook his head. But they panicked. They couldn't carry them while being chased. Poirot closed his eyes briefly, as though listening to thoughts rearrange themselves. No, mon ami. Not panicked, interrupted. The constables searched the greenhouse thoroughly, but found no intruder. As they stepped outside, Poirot's expression held a deep, still contemplation. Inspector, he said softly, the murderer is more dangerous now than ever. Their secrets unravel, and soon they will strike again, not to flee, but to silence. Hale grimaced. Then, we tighten security. Poirot shook his head. No, mon ami, we prepare. The final act approaches, and beneath the restless moonlight of Charnwood Court, the trap began to close. As Poirot and Hale stepped back toward the main path, the greenhouse door whispering shut behind them, a deep stillness settled over the garden. The constables continued their search along the perimeter, torches slicing through the night. But Poirot's attention drifted inward to thoughts forming like constellations, each clue a star aching to align. He paused under an archway of ivy, eyes half-lidded in contemplation. You see, Inspector, he murmured, the murderer's actions tonight speak more loudly than their words. They search, they plant, they run. These are not the behaviors of one confident in their position. They are the movements of a person who fears the truth will rise to the surface. Hale folded his arms. But we still lack the crucial link, what exactly the murderer needed from Neville's papers. Poirot's voice was quiet. Something that incriminates them. Something that proves their involvement in the old injustice. And they believe wrongly. I suspect that by destroying the evidence, they may avoid exposure. As they crossed the terrace, the ballroom came into view once more. Faces pressed anxiously toward the doors. The guests resembled figures in a tableau of dread, frozen by the knowledge that a murderer moved among them. Inside, Lady Eugenia clutched a glass of water with trembling hands. Julian stood beside her, his own nerves frayed. Adrian paced near the hearth again, though now his steps were less measured, charged instead with agitation. Verena remained where Poirot had left her. Wrap pulled tightly around her shoulders, as if she sought protection from the room itself. Poirot entered, leaving Hale to gather the constables. The moment the detective crossed the threshold, the room quieted, all eyes on him. Lady Eugenia approached, voice trembling. Monsieur Poirot, has the murderer been caught? Poirot offered her a gentle, reassuring smile. No, madame, but the circle closes. Soon, the truth will no longer hide. She exhaled shakily and returned to her seat. Poirot walked slowly toward the center of the ballroom, observing each face in turn. Someone, he said softly, attempted to flee through the garden. They did not escape, but their actions reveal a crucial truth. Adrian flinched at these words, though Verena tightened her grip on her wrap and looked down. Sir Geoffrey, still seated in dignified silence, observed Poirot, as a judge might observe a witness taking the stand. Poirot lifted the torn scrap of letter discovered in the greenhouse. This message was intended for Sir Neville, he announced. It contains a warning, perhaps even a threat. Someone begged him to reconsider his announcement. Someone who feared ruin. Julian stepped forward slightly. May I see the handwriting? Poirot nodded, allowing him to inspect it. Julian paled. It resembles Neville's private correspondence file. But this handwriting is not his, Poirot asked gently. Do you recognize it? Julian swallowed. I believe it belongs to Mrs. Whitcomb, Adrian's mother. A sharp silence fell. Adrian stiffened in outrage. My mother. She passed years ago. Why bring her into this? Julian lifted the paper helplessly. Her handwriting had a distinct slant. I worked with her briefly before she retired. This resembles it very closely. Poirot's tone remained steady. Monsieur Whitcomb, did your mother ever correspond with Sir Neville regarding the inheritance trust? Adrian hesitated dangerously long. She oversaw parts of it. She believed herself justified in her decisions. And you benefited. Poirot finished softly. Adrian's jaw locked. "Are you calling her corrupt?" "I call nothing," Poirot said. "I merely observe the chain that binds the past to the present." Lady Eugenia gasped quietly. Verena's eyes filled with fresh confusion. "But if Adrian's mother was involved, why target me? Why plant evidence against me?" Poirot studied her carefully. "Because, mademoiselle, you are the rightful heir. Neville intended to restore what was taken from you, and so the murderer sought to mislead us to point suspicion toward you, thereby protecting themselves." Verena shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. "I never knew any of this. Why would anyone hide something like that from me?" "Because the guilty benefit from your ignorance," Poirot answered. Before more could be said, a constable rushed in from the hallway. "Inspector Hale," he called urgently. "We found something else near the side hedge." A glove. Hale retrieved it, then brought it to Poirot. The glove was fine leather, elegant in its make. Poirot inspected the stitching, the faint scent of perfume clinging to it, and the tiny embossed initials on the inside cuff. A. W. Adrian went rigid. "This is absurd. That glove was stolen from my coat pocket earlier tonight. I was looking for it before dinner." Julian exhaled sharply. "Or you discarded it while fleeing the garden." Adrian rounded on him in fury. "I did no such thing. Anyone here could have taken it and planted it." Poirot raised a calming hand. "Let us not fall into chaos, mes amis. The murderer seeks precisely that." He turned the glove over again. "This object, like the handkerchief, may be planted, or not. We cannot rely solely on objects. We must rely on behavior." He stepped closer to the group, voice dropping to a penetrating calm. "Tonight, one among you has lied. Not once, but repeatedly. Their story shifts with each question. Their movements betray fear. Their actions show knowledge of events they should not know." The guests leaned forward. Breath held, collectively. Poirot's gaze moved from Verena to Adrian to Julian, then finally to Lady Eugenia, lingering only long enough to stir uncertainty before shifting away. "I see the pattern now," he murmured. "The murderer believes they can outpace us. They believe their actions will hide their motive, but they forget precision, not panic, reveals the truth." A sudden clatter sounded from the dining room, startling several guests. Hale turned sharply. "Another disturbance?" Poirot raised a hand. "No, this is merely the house settling. But the murderer, I assure you, is not settling at all." His eyes shone with quiet brilliance. "Inspector," Poirot said, "the time has come. We must gather everyone, for the truth now stands ready to be uncovered, one thread at a time." And somewhere within the room, the murderer exhaled a breath they hoped no one heard. The guests stood frozen as Poirot's quiet pronouncement seemed to seal the room in invisible tension. Inspector Hale moved to close the terrace doors, stationing a constable beside each exit. No one would leave now, not until the truth was pulled from the shadows. Poirot, with deliberate calm, walked toward the far end of the ballroom, where the moonlight filtered through tall windows, casting pale silver across the carpet. He turned slowly, taking in every face once more, as though memorizing each tremor, each evasive glance, each carefully crafted mask. "Mes amis," he said softly, "the time has come to gather every thread. You have been patient with Hercule Poirot. Now you shall see the tapestry as it truly is." Lady Eugenia stood, trembling slightly. "Monsieur Poirot, must we endure more suspense? Please, tell us what you have discovered." Poirot offered a small bow. "In a moment, madame. First, I must ask each of you one final question." He turned to Adrian Whitcomb. "Monsieur, earlier you denied involvement in Sir Neville's death. You spoke of your mother's role, yet you withheld something important. You said she believed herself justified. But did you believe so as well?" Adrian stiffened. "I believed the original allocation was practical. The younger heir was unprepared. The guardian, my mother, acted responsibly." "None," Poirot corrected gently. "She acted conveniently. The funds benefited your ventures. And now that truth is poised to emerge, your livelihood is endangered. Adrian's jaw worked silently. Verena watched him, confusion giving way to dawning hurt. Poirot turned next to Julian. Monsieur Harcourt, you knew more than you first admitted. You recognized the handwriting immediately. Yet you delayed speaking. Why? Julian swallowed. Because I feared what it meant. If Neville intended to expose the trust's corruption, I knew Adrian would be implicated, and I owed him my career. Poirot nodded. Loyalty clouds judgment, but does not make one a murderer. Julian exhaled shakily, relief flickering in his eyes. Poirot shifted to Verena. Mademoiselle Locke. The inheritance unexpected, yes. Yet someone knew. Someone who feared your rightful claim would ruin them. You are innocent, though framed with considerable creativity. Verena's voice broke. Who would do that to me? I have harmed no one. Poirot lifted the fleur-de-lis clasp found near the statue. This, I believe, belongs not to you, but to someone who wished us to think so. A subtle deceit, the kind made under pressure. The room held its breath. Poirot then turned to Lady Eugenia. Madame, you invited all these guests tonight. Tell me, who insisted Sir Neville speak this evening? Who urged him to reveal the truth now, rather than later? Lady Eugenia blinked in confusion. Why, I did. He asked for my opinion, and I said that truth delayed becomes truth endangered. But surely you cannot think. Poirot raised a calming hand. I accuse you of nothing, madame, but your answer clarifies a timeline. Mercy. He returned to the center of the ballroom. Now you see, motives swirl around us, but only one among you united motive, opportunity, and behavior. Hale stepped closer. Poirot, if you know who it is, you should say it plainly. Ah, but of course. Poirot's eyes glimmered. The murderer was never the one who protested the loudest, nor the quietest. They were the one who always arrived at the scene, just a moment too soon. His gaze settled, unwavering, upon Julian Harcourt. The young man froze. A collective gasp rippled across the room. Adrian stared in shock. Julian? But he defended me, he said. Poirot raised a finger. Exactly. He defended you at every turn. Too eagerly. Because if suspicion stayed on you, Monsieur Whitcomb, then no one would examine him too closely. Julian's face blanched. This is absurd. Why would I kill Neville? Poirot stepped closer, voice soft but cutting. Because you needed that inheritance far more than anyone realized. You were drowning in debt. Your career with Sir Neville was collapsing. He intended to dismiss you. And then you discovered the codicil, the proof that Verena was the rightful heir. Julian's voice cracked. No, he never told. But you overheard, Poirot said. In the study, 2 days ago, you knew the announcement tonight would expose your financial misconduct. So you killed him before he could speak. Julian staggered backward. That's not true, Poirot. I admired him. Poirot continued, relentless. You left the cufflink to suggest a struggle. You planted the handkerchief to turn suspicion toward Verena. You panicked when we found the burned document and searched upstairs for the remaining papers. And when the net tightened, you attempted one last misdirection in the garden. The blood drained completely from Julian's face. Poirot lifted the torn scrap of letter. This was not a threat from Adrian's mother. It was written by you, Julian, imitating her handwriting. A ruse to deepen suspicion. Hale moved forward. Julian Harcourt, did you kill Sir Neville Ashcombe? Julian looked wildly around the room, seeking sympathy, escape, anything. But every face stared back with horror or betrayal, none with hope. Finally, his shoulders sagged. His voice came out hollow. He said he would ruin me, destroy everything. He left me no choice. Verena covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Adrian collapsed onto a chair, stunned. Lady Eugenia wept quietly. Poirot sighed, the weight of human frailty evident in his expression. There is always a choice, monsieur. Murder is the coward's solution. Hale stepped forward. You are under arrest. Julian's gaze darted once more to the terrace, as if contemplating flight. but the constables closed in. The young man bowed his head. As he was led away, Poirot remained still, watching the path of the broken man. The room exhaled, at last, relief, sorrow, disbelief merging into a single sigh. Lady Eugenia approached Poirot. "Monsieur, thank you for restoring truth." Poirot offered a small, melancholy smile. "Truth, madame, is like the moonbeam over your garden. It shines whether welcomed or not." And as dawn's early light crept through the windows, Hercule Poirot stood alone, reflecting upon the terrible simplicity of human choices and the fragile threads that bind justice to the hearts of men. As the first pale light of dawn seeped over the gardens, Charnwood Court breathed out the exhaustion of a night steeped in deception, fear, and truth. The constables escorted Julian Harcourt through the terrace doors, his figure small and defeated against the widening day. Only then did the guests, those who remained, begin to stir from their stunned stillness, murmuring in soft, fragile tones like survivors of a violent storm. Hercule Poirot stood near the window, gazing outward as though the sprawling gardens offered one final clue to be solved. But there were no mysteries left, only the quiet ache of human frailty. Inspector Hale approached, weary, but respectful. "Well, Poirot, it all fits together now. I almost wish it didn't." Poirot inclined his head slowly. "Oui, mon ami. The truth often has little compassion for those who hoped for innocence." Hale folded his arms, staring after the departing officers. He was young, talented even. He might have had a fine career. "Perhaps," Poirot murmured. But his ambition outpaced his morality. When Sir Neville discovered the misappropriations, he intended to correct them immediately. Julian panicked, first attempting persuasion, then threats, and finally the most unforgivable act. Hale nodded grimly. "And the framing of Verena, that was cruel." Poirot turned from the window, his expression shadowed. "Cruel, yes, but revealing. Only someone close enough to her, someone who observed her manner, her belongings, could frame her convincingly." Julian worked beside Neville, moved among the guests, and knew precisely how to mislead. But what he did not understand, Poirot allowed himself a faint, ironic smile, was that lies, however clever, cannot contradict the nature of the human heart. Lady Eugenia approached, her composure steadier now. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I owe you more than gratitude. I feared tonight would end in scandal without justice. Instead, you have brought clarity to Neville's memory." Poirot bowed gently. "Madame, I merely followed the truth where it led. Sir Neville wished to restore what had been taken. His purpose was noble. Your home has witnessed tragedy. Yes, but also the restoration of honor." Verena Locke stepped forward next, her eyes still rimmed with the remnants of shock and sorrow. "Monsieur Poirot, I do not know what to say. My life has changed overnight. I had no idea Neville intended to name me as heir. And now this." She paused, swallowing. "I feel guilty, though I've done nothing. Guilty that such a revelation might have driven him to his death." Poirot's voice softened. "Mademoiselle, guilt is often the companion of the innocent. But Sir Neville made his choice long before tonight. He believed justice should not wait for convenience. His death is the fault of one man alone." Verena nodded, tears glistening but controlled. Adrian Whitcomb hovered at her side, subdued, his earlier arrogance stripped away. When he spoke, it was with newfound humility. "I cannot change my family's past," he said quietly, "but I intend to ensure you receive everything Neville meant for you. That is the only restitution I can offer." Poirot watched the exchange with calm scrutiny. "A wise decision, monsieur. Redemption begins, not with excuses, but with action." Adrian bowed his head. Sir Geoffrey Elmsley, leaning heavily on his cane, approached Poirot with a grave smile. "You have done remarkable work tonight, Monsieur Poirot. You've reminded me that justice is rarely a simple matter of law. It requires insight, courage, and, above all, humanity." Poirot's eyes twinkled softly. "Ah, mon cher juge, I merely listen. To voices, to silences, to contradictions. Human beings reveal themselves not through their statements, but through the little things they cannot hide. The judge chuckled. If only all the courts possessed such wisdom. At last, the guests began to disperse slowly, tentatively guided by staff and steady reassurances that Charnwood Court was once again a place of safety. The shadows of night receded inch by inch, carried away by the rising sun. Soon only Poirot, Hale, and Lady Eugenia remained near the terrace doors. Hale exhaled deeply. Well, Poirot, I suppose this concludes the matter. Poirot straightened his cuffs with delicate precision. Yes, Inspector. But remember, crime does not conclude with the arrest. Its consequences ripple outward, touching all who stood near it. Lady Eugenia nodded with quiet sorrow. Neville wished only to correct a wrong. He never imagined the price would be his life. Poirot stepped beside her, offering gentle comfort. Truth, Madame Charnwood, is a demanding companion, but it allows no compromise. Neville Ashcombe understood this, and though his death is tragic, his intentions are preserved. The wrong is corrected, and justice, however heavy, prevails. She pressed a hand to her heart. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot smiled, soft yet proud. It is for such moments, Madame, that Hercule Poirot exists. He turned toward the grand entrance hall, gathering his coat and hat. Hale offered him one last nod of respect. Until our next case. Nah. Poirot lifted a single eyebrow. Let us hope, mon ami, that England enjoys a quiet season. Hale chuckled. Unlikely. Poirot's moustaches twitched with a quiet, knowing amusement. Indeed. He stepped out into the morning light. The sky shimmered in delicate hues of gold and lavender. The Moonbeam garden, now peaceful, its secrets exposed. Poirot paused only once to glance back at the statue that had borne silent witness to the tragedy. Then he continued down the path. Refined and composed, a solitary figure departing from yet another mystery unraveled by the meticulous order of his little grey cells. And so Hercule Poirot walked onward, leaving justice behind him completed, inevitable and carrying with him the delicate, enduring understanding of the human heart. The end.